All sources from Saturday scrimmage say the defense got the better of the offense. So is this cause for concern for the offense, or is this cause for praise for the defense? We discuss on today's episode.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis and Lacey Butler, your hosts. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Playoffs are winding down. The sports are sporting like we want them to. The Olympics are over. But this summer, going into the fall, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, recapping Saturday's scrimmage, offense struggled, defense was balling. Cause for concern for the offense, or should we just praise the defense, right? Iron sharpens iron. In the second segment, the running game struggled to get going. It's part of the offense, obviously, right? So what is my, level of confidence or my level of concern for the running game going into the season, especially with the loss of Cedric Baxter? And then in the last segment, looking ahead to next Saturday's scrimmage, what do we want to see in next Saturday's scrimmage that we didn't necessarily see this past Saturday? All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we get into Saturday scrimmage and just, Texas and, Hook'em and all of that, feels so crazy that the Olympics are over, right? It's just like the last, 3-4 weeks. You've been rooting super hard for America. The patriotism has been off the charts. You're watching all the greatest athletes in the world do their thing. We watched Kevin Durant, as well as a bunch of other Texas athletes, of course, but the most recent was Kevin Durant getting his 4th gold medal, all-time leader in men's Olympic history. Now it's just over, right? Now it's back to your regularly scheduled programming. I guess, my patriotism has gone down significantly, since the Olympics ended. And, I went from USA to, hook 'em, I guess, right? Back to my Texas pride and being kind of cool about this country, right? So it's crazy the Olympics are over and, we got to wait 4 more years to see it in LA. But trust and believe it's going to be jumping when it's in LA. Talking about this Texas football team, I said that Saturday was a really big day for this football team. And I believe now at this point, with Colorado State being about 19 days away, Michigan being less than a month away, you're probably closer to who you are than who you want to be at this point, right? And so, even though they're just practice reports, even though they're just scrimmage reports, I do take them, pretty seriously because, like I said, they've been working all offseason, right? So obviously they can get better over the next 20 days. But like I said, at this point, you're probably closer to who you are than who you want to be. Every, report that I saw, all the intel that I saw from Inside Texas, Horns 24/7, Twitter, whatever, said that the defense had a really good day, right? The defense probably got the better of the offense. And really that kind of seems like a theme that we've heard in practice, spring and fall camp for like the last couple of seasons at the University of Texas, right? It seems like that's a common theme that at least in these practices, the defense is getting the better of the offense. Now, I always say iron sharpens iron, and it's a good thing either way, right? Because, when the season starts, the defense is going to be on our side, right? And we're going to have to rely on our defense to win games at a high level this year. But, you also, read these reports and it's like, the offense was struggling and it's like, Steve Sarkisian's offense with all these weapons that we've been talking about all offseason, they're still struggling, so I wanted to talk about it today. And it's like, is it more about the praise for the defense or is it cause for concern for the offense? And to me, I'm more concerned for the offense, but I do want to start by praising the defense, right? Because like I said, we are going to have to rely on them to win games, right? And, you read the reports and it sounds like, there were players balling at every level on this defense. They talked about Alfred Collins and, Vernon Broughton, the starting D tackles, how they looked really good, right? And, obviously that's going to be a big point of emphasis losing Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. They talked about the players behind them, Alex January, Aaron Bryant, Jermaine Loyal, Tia Surveyor and Bill Norton coming in. They even talked about how, just physically Sadir Mitchell looked good, right? So the defensive tackles looked really good, but also they did a really good job on the scrimmage because the running game was not up to par, from all the reports that I read. And they talked about the edge rushers, right? And just like the freakish athleticism that was on display, right? Trey Moore, probably a top 5 to top 10 edge rusher in the country right now. Colin Simmons, we talked about, a state champion basketball player. Ethan Burke, All-American lacrosse player in high school, 6'6" at that edge position. Barron Sorrell just named to Bruce Feldman's freak list, Justice Finkley, They said that he had a sack in the scrimmage. So the defensive line as a whole, looked really good. And Colin Simmons didn't even get a bunch of mention, right? But, the defensive line as a whole was really good. At the linebacker position, they said Anthony Hill was Mr. Hit Stick, right? Just knocking things out over the middle. He had a really good game, really good scrimmage, I should say. I almost said Tia Savea, right? I'm getting a little tribal period. But Leon Galafau, right? They talked about him really being really good in terms of the linebacker position. Mo Blackwell, they said he had a stinger. Doesn't look like anything too crazy. There was a lot of praise on the back end, right? They said the safeties, regardless of what safety group was in the scrimmage, right? They looked really good, looked really cohesive, and really kind of looked night and day compared to what we saw last year when our safeties were just getting toasted left and right, right? Whether it was Michael Taft, Derek Williams, Andrew Makuba had an interception. Even Jelani McDonald coming in playing really well. They said the safeties looked really good. And then at corner, right, they talked about, Jahdae Barron made some really good plays. They talked about him forcing a fumble on Christian Clark at the 1 yard line and goal line situations. They said Kobe Black looked good. So really, like I said, at every level, the defense was coming out and balling. And, that's why, every source that I read said the defense got the better of the day. So I do want to start off by praising the defense, right, and saying that, it is really good that they could come out in the scrimmage and assert themselves the way that they did. But I'm going to lean on the side of it's more concern for the offense, right? Even though it's the fall, even though it's fall camp, right? Even though nothing really matters right now, right? These games don't count. These scrimmages don't count. I'm still going to say it's concern for the offense. The reason I say it's concern for the offense is because we've heard in previous years that the defense was getting the better of the offense in these scrimmages. And even though we've had good offenses, maybe even great offenses, we've yet to see an elite offense at the University of Texas under Steve Sarkisian. I'm just completely wiping out 2021 out of my memory, right? But 2022, we were 56th in passing and 35th in total offense. Neither one of those are elite. I wouldn't even consider that great, right? In 2023, we were 17th in passing. That's probably outside of elite, so I would call that great. 9th in total offense. That's probably closer to elite. But what we saw last year was in the red zone, we were in the bottom 100, right? And so it was almost like we could amass yards, but when it mattered the most, we couldn't cash in, right? And so it's hard to say, even though you're 9th in total offense and accumulating yards, it's hard to say you have an elite offense if you can't score in the red zone. If you're, bottom 100, bottom, third in the country and scoring in the red zone. And that culminated, in one of the biggest games of the season when we had 4 straight chances to get 1 yard against Oklahoma and weren't able to do so. So I feel like in previous years, we've heard, some inconsistencies about the offense or the offense struggling against the defense, and then those have translated to the season. You felt like coming into this year, even with the loss of Cedric Baxter, that's a big loss, right? But you felt like coming into this year, this was the group, right? This is the group for Steve Sarkisian that should be elite. Like, this is the group for Steve Sarkisian that should just be running all over the field, hitting their head on the goalpost. I mean, just causing nightmares for defensive coordinators. But it's not causing nightmares for Pete Kwiatkowski and his group, right? And it's like, when are we going to see that offense at the University of Texas that resembles that 2020 Alabama group, where you just have all the answers to any question that's presented to you, right? And then you're reading things like Quinn got off to a slow start, even against the second team. Then Arch Manning came in and he didn't necessarily light it up either. Then you're hearing things like the offensive line had its moments, right? The quarterbacks did really good in the second half in terms of 2-minute and end of half situations, but that was mostly against zone coverages where, he was able to sit back there and take what the defense was giving him, right? But you look at this offense, and we're talking about being able to go 6-7 deep at wide receiver, right? Even though you lost Cedric Baxter, we're talking about the depth at running back and how well Tashard Choice has recruited. We're talking about having 3 tight end ones in Juan Davis, Amari Niblack, and Gunnar Helm. So if that's the case, right, and Quinn Ewers is in his 3rd year, right, with all of this experience and being a top Heisman candidate, then why are we still reading reports about the offense struggling in the scrimmage? Now, obviously, it's a good thing that the defense was balling, but like I said, I feel like we've reached a point in terms of a talent level on this offense, in terms of experience level with Quinn Ewers and in terms of experience with Steve Sarkisian with this group at the University of Texas, that this offense should be flying around the field and hitting on all cylinders. And it was very disappointing for me to read that not only did the defense get the better of the day, but even Quinn was struggling against the second group. Like I said, this should be the year for the elite offense, and especially in the passing game without Cedric Baxter now, this passing offense is going to have to carry us throughout the season if we want to be conference champions and national champions. And right now, it still seems like this offense has a lot of work to do. And like I said, you're probably a lot closer to who you are right now than who you want to be. Of course, the offense can continue to improve. Of course, they could come out next Saturday and dominate in the scrimmage. But like I said, when we're talking about going 6 deep at wide receiver, when we're talking about having one of the best quarterbacks in college football, when we're talking about the depth at running back, the depth at tight end, having an offensive line that could win the Joe Moore Award for being the best offensive line in the country, and you struggle to get a run game going in the scrimmage, you struggle to get the passing game going in the scrimmage, the defensive line is getting pressure in terms of getting to the quarterback and stopping running backs in the backfield. And that's something we've seen for years now in terms of the offseason, and it's led to some inconsistencies in the offense. It scares me and leads me to believe that we could see even more inconsistencies in the offense this year, even though talent-wise, this should be arguably the best offense in the country. So good for the defense. I'm glad that the defense balled out in the scrimmage, but I was a little disappointed that we read a whole bunch about the offense not really being up to par this past Saturday in the scrimmage. A quick word from our sponsors, and I get into my confidence level right now in the running backs without Cedric Baxter on this Texas Longhorns football team. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so talking about the running game, we heard Steve Sarkisian when he addressed the loss of Cedric Baxter, just talked about, feeling bad for him. And, obviously he's one of the most talented running backs in the country, him being named to the Doak Walker Award list, and, how that, Trey Wisner and, Jaden Blue would have to step up in their roles with Cedric Baxter being injured. He also talked about how, they would assess in terms of the scrimmage, what they would need to do if they would need to move anybody to the running back position due to this most recent injury. And we did read some practice reports that Darian Gillette, the linebacker, kind of edge / linebacker hybrid, did get some snaps at running back. Not sure if he's going to be permanently moved there. I was really excited to see him on the defensive side of the ball. And, we talk about all that depth we have. I think it's more so talent right now. But, we talk about what we have in the running back room. I think we, barring any more injuries, let me knock on wood, I think Darian Gillette could stay on the defensive side of the ball, and we should be good offensively from what we have in that room, right? With Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner, Jared Gibson, and Christian Clark. In terms of what we heard about from the running backs in the scrimmage, like I said, in the last segment, we heard that the running game struggled to get going, right? And that's also something that we've heard in previous years in the practice reports and the scrimmages in the spring and whatever. And last year we had a really good running game, but there were times where we did struggle to run the ball and some of the biggest moments of the season. And you hope that's not a thing this year, right? They specifically and kind of especially talked about that running up the front, right? And that's something we've seen in previous years where we tried to run up the middle or get our inside running game going. That's where we were kind of stalled out, maybe in that guard to guard, kind of location, right? They did talk about Cam Williams and Devon Campbell looking really good on that right side. So maybe it was Hayden Connor and Jake Majors. Maybe it was the second team offensive line, although I did see a report saying the second team offensive line looked good. But nonetheless, for whatever reason, right, we struggled to get the running game going in practice, right? And, obviously, you lost a lot of talent in Cedric Baxter, but, you do have talented running backs in the room. And, hopefully that's something that improves over the course of the offseason and, over the course of the season now that we're, about 19, 20 days away, essentially 3 weeks away from Texas Longhorns football. They did say that Jaden Blue and Trey Wisner were able to make some plays. They were able to squeeze out some runs and made a couple nice catches. They said that Trey Wisner had a really good catch and run in terms of a screen. So, they're going to be the bulk of your running back rotation this year. And I think Jaden Blue, is really solid. And I think Trey Wisner, they talked about him in pass protection as well. He's going to be really solid for the Texas Longhorns this year. I talked about Jarrett Gibson, how he had a nice, little run up the middle for 5 yards to score a touchdown. And he talked about, Christian Clark being able to run inside and, showing good burst and, patience in terms of being an inside runner. But he did put the ball on the ground a couple of times, notably on the 1 yard line, Jahdae Barron getting to him and causing a fumble at the goal line. So, I think, Sark kind of came out and said it himself that, Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark may not be ready right now for a huge role, but they are very talented running backs that will contribute, a lot in due time at the University of Texas. Right now, my confidence level in the running game, I would say, is probably a 7.5, 8 out of 10. I do think Jaden Blue is really good, and I think that Trey Wisner is a dog and is going to bring that same level of intensity he brought on the special team side to the offense and to the running game this year in a bigger role now that Cedric Baxter is hurt. But I do think because we've relied so much on the running game in the past, right? And the running game is such a big part of this offense, and we're still, even without Cedric Baxter, looking to be, championship contenders, then there's going to be a lot of pressure on this running game, right? And right now, my confidence is like I said, a 7.5 out of 10, because they talked about, Jaden Blue not necessarily being able to get going in large scale, right? They talked about Trey Wisner, how he's dealt with some dehydration, and so he's kind of been limited in practice and maybe was limited a little bit in the scrimmage. And then Christian Clark and Jarrett Gibson, as talented as they are, 4 stars, not necessarily ready to take that big leap in terms of getting, huge workloads this year for the Texas Longhorns football team. And at this point, you can't bring in, somebody that can rival Cedric Baxter's talent or production that you expected to get from him. So, when you look at it and we're hearing that the defense, the running game struggled against this defense. We heard that last year, but then we had the number 3 run defense in the country. So it made sense with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. And obviously Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton and all of those defensive tackles in the defensive line, the linebackers with Anthony Hill, they have the potential to be all world on this defense as well, right? They talked about the athleticism of this defense just stands out, right? And it's something we haven't seen at the University of Texas in years past. But I do think that, at times this year, especially when you're playing defenses like Michigan in less than a month, Oklahoma's defense is going to be really good. Georgia's defense speaks for itself, right? A&M and I think some other teams in the SEC defenses are going to surprise us this year. There are going to be times where our running game may struggle, right? And I think that, especially without Cedric Baxter, teams may load up on the outside and load up on the passing game and kind of force us to beat them with our running game. And right now, based on what we're hearing in the first scrimmage, the running game was MIA, right? The running game did not show up and show out in terms of the scrimmage. So right now, obviously, still time to improve, still time to adjust. We'll see, if they keep Darian Gillette at that position or not. But my confidence level right now going into the season with the running back room is a 7.5 out of 10. I think the Cedric Baxter loss is big. I know a lot of people are saying we'll be fine. We have a lot of depth in the room. Like I said, it's only 12 carries career behind Jaden Blue. So I like to say talent right now instead of depth. But, it is cause for concern, right? And, the first kind of tangible example we got of the running game out on the field without Cedric Baxter, from all reports, didn't sound good. So a lot of talent in the room, obviously 4 stars all over the board, and Jaden Blue, Trey Wisner, Jarrett Gibson, and Christian Clark. But in their first real action, even though it's a scrimmage, in their first real action without Cedric Baxter, the running game struggled to get going, and the defensive line feasted on the offensive line. So we'll see how that looks, over the next couple of weeks and going into the season. But right now, the running game could be a little shaky going into the Texas Longhorns football season, and we can't afford that, Like I said, it's such a big part of this offense. It's a big part of what we do, and we're not going to be able to reach our ceiling without a great running game. So based on what we heard this past Saturday, the running game was not there. Right now, I'm confident, my confidence level is a 7.5 out of 10. We'll see how much that improves my bad. We'll see how much that improves over the course of the offseason going into August 31st against Colorado State. Quick word from our sponsors and what I'm looking forward to seeing in the next scrimmage for the Texas Longhorns this coming up Saturday. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. I was sad this morning when I watched the women's basketball game. I'm like, damn, the Olympics are over. But then I turned it back on and they were doing like some slow walk or some running or something. I didn't watch it. You know what I mean? But I was like, the Olympics were essentially over for me. But as the playoffs wind down, the Olympics are over. We get fewer games and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball, which I no longer watch because the Texas Rangers are now 7.5 games back in the division after winning the World Series. We won, but at what cost? All right, so things I'm looking forward to in next Saturday's scrimmage. This is what I want to hear about in the reports. The first thing I want to hear about the offense dominate, right? And like I said, there's no disrespect to the defense, but I feel like the offense is going to carry us this year. It was so many times last year where the defense carried us. I mean, I remember going into the Wyoming game in the fourth quarter. We were, it was a 10-10 game until we, scored 21 straight and ended up winning that game 31-10. But like I said, Steve Sarkisian's superpower is his offense. When we look at what we have on this offense in terms of talent, there should never be a defense that could just completely shut us down or shut us out, right? Like, we have way too much talent. I mean, like I said, I felt this. I mean, I want to say I felt this should be the 2020 Alabama group. Like, this should be the group that just goes out there and hangs them on everybody, right? You know what them is, right? Hangs them on everybody. And so that could still be the case. But, I want to see that growth into next Saturday in the scrimmage. I want to see them dominate. I want to see the quarterbacks coming out and just zipping throws, right? Making plays all, up and down the field with these talented wide receivers and tight ends, even the running backs out of the backfield, right? I want to see a better day from the offensive line. I want to see them asserting their will against this defense, moving people in the run game, giving our quarterbacks time to be comfortable and make plays, whether that's Trey Owens, Arch Manning, or Quinn Ewers, right? They talked about, in the first scrimmage, how the offense struggled at first, but then when they got more zone coverage in the second half, they started to make plays. Well, defenses aren't just going to sit back all season and play zone and let Quinn Ewers pick them apart, right? And just let people sit in zones. They're going to come up, they're going to challenge us, and they're going to play man. So whether it's, the quarterbacks not being able to make the tight window throws, or whether it's the wide receivers not being able to create separation against man, whatever that is, I want to see that cleaned up in the next scrimmage. Second thing is, this is something we haven't talked about a lot, but they said there were not a lot of great punts, right? Right now, there's a punting competition, and the punting thus far, especially in the scrimmage this past Saturday, has not been great. That's something, special teams has been a big part of the Texas Longhorns' success the last couple of years, and that's something that we don't talk about a lot, but it's huge for this Texas Longhorns football team. If we can't win the field of position battles, right, or if we can't, pin, offenses deep, and, we have our defenses working on short fields and, whatever, right? I don't want to just super get into special teams, right? Because I'm not that passionate about it, but, we need a good punter, right? That's essential to any good team success. We need to be able to pin teams deep and make teams work hard to score against us, right? Make teams drive the length of the field. If we can't get good punts and teams are constantly starting their drives at the 30 and 40-yard line, that just puts more pressure on our defense to stop them from scoring, and ultimately puts more pressure on our offense to score enough points to win games. So don't know what's going on with the punters. You know what I'm saying? Why they looking cheese so far in the offseason, and why they look cheese in the last scrimmage on Saturday. But I'm hoping that the punting looks better going into the next scrimmage in the season this Saturday, and then ultimately on August 31st against Colorado State. And the last thing I want to see, I wrote it down. I can't remember off the top of my head, so my bad, y'all. Hold on. I want to see the secondary continue to show improvement from last season, right? We saw last year in the Houston game. Where else, man? There was a one point in the Alabama game, before we turned up. What other games was it? Kansas State turned up on us at the end. TCU turned up on us. Oklahoma, right? What they did to beat us. Even at times, Oklahoma State in that game, even though we beat them pretty bad, the Big 12 championship, we gave up some big plays. And, of course, Michael Penix Jr. probably got drafted in the top 10, based on what he did to us, going to the Atlanta Falcons. But shout out to, I can't wait to watch him at Bijan one day. That's going to be special. He looked good in his first preseason game, Michael Penix Jr., that is. But, we brought in some more talent in the secondary. And, based on what I heard in the first scrimmage, they did really good. Like I said, Andrew Makuba had a pick. Jahdae Barron, had that big play on Christian Clark at the 1-yard line, forcing a fumble. They talked about Jelani McDonald. He had a pick and how he looked really good at safety. Michael Taft, Derek Williams, they made plays. I didn't hear a bunch about Malik Muhammad, but we know he's solid. And, Jalen Gilbo, there's a reason he's starting at the star position, and they're moving Jahdae Barron around, right? They even talked about Gavin Holmes having 2 to 3 pass breakups. So, one of the biggest causes for concern coming into this season is how the secondary would look based on what we saw at the end of last season last year. And based on the first scrimmage against, all of this talent we have on the offense, it seems like the secondary got the better of us, at least in the first scrimmage. So I want to see them to continue to build that continuity, continue to build that chemistry. They said they're seeing a lot fewer coverage busts than they did this year, compared to previous years. And so that's really good. And we're going to have to rely on, that secondary a lot this year, right? I think that a lot of teams that we play, they're not just going to try to run the ball on us and, keep the ball away from our offense, right? There's going to be teams in the SEC and teams in the playoffs they're going to try to air it out, right? And I think that secondary is going to be a big reason why Texas is one of the best teams in the country, because I think all that they was trying to do to us last year, they're not going to be able to do to us this year, right? But I still want to see us, continue to build that chemistry, continue to build that continuity, especially when we're still trying to figure out where we're going to put guys and who's going to be where, right? Who's going to be your starting safeties? Who's going to be the next rotation off the bench? Who's going to be at field corner? Is it going to be Jahdae Barron? Are you going to put him primarily at star? Who's winning the battle between Gavin Holmes and Javion Cole? These are things that we're still trying to figure out. In the midst of figuring those things out, I hope the secondary continues to improve. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hook 'em. Peace.